Rick, can you send me a very detailed video of exactly what not to do to not make my guns full auto?
Yeah.
I don't want to do it accidentally, so I need a video showing
we'll
me.
make this a short. So what not to do. Hey everybody, welcome to the Gun Rack, SCI's podcast on everything firearms. I'm Christian, your host, the event coordinator here. I'm here with Steve Ross, Director of Marketing, Rick Casner, Program Director of Firearms, and then our Firearms Specialist, Bart Miller. How's it going, everybody?
Doing good.
Good. Small talk?
Good.
No small talk? I don't think small talk.
How are you doing today, Christian? No one ever asked you how you're doing.
I stay locked in my office all day for work and then all night on video games. So it's all the same to me. I'm just living in the matrix. But
you're just connected, man.
Right. We have a cool gunsmithing topic to talk about today. And that's my gun no-go boom. So and I always say I'm not a gunsmith. And so if my gun no-go boom, I'm bringing it to Bart or I'm bringing it to Rick, and that's all I can give them. I'm just like, I pull the trigger, I hear a click or I don't hear a click, but it won't fire. How often do you guys get that, in a shop as, a go-to gunsmith, and how do you figure out what's wrong?
I would say probably a third to half of the time that when they bring in a gun up to the counter and they present it, they're just like, it doesn't work or it doesn't fire. How they interpret those words can be a lot different from one person to the next. So really the repair begins with the customer. I don't even need to see the gun. I just want to talk to the customer. He is your R&D. He was there when the gun malfunctioned, and it's your job as a gunsmith to extract that information, because the more you can extract at the counter, and these little insignificant details can often save you a lot of time going through trying to duplicate the issue, which is really at the heart of a diagnosis.
Yeah, I would mirror what Bart says. I think that's the biggest thing is it depends also on what you're gunsmithing, how you're specializing, right? If you're specializing in making modifications to firearms, you're not necessarily going to have that same ratio of people coming in and just complaining that their firearm won't function. But if you're a general gunsmith where you see pretty much everything come across your counter, it is going to follow that flow. It also comes down to your area that you're hunting in. Are you hunting it in a place where people are duck hunting and they're close to ponds, and why is that firearm malfunctioning? Why isn't it going bang? So that comes into play as well.
Steve, you had something?
Yeah, I had a question for you guys. So correct me if I'm wrong, but like a gun that breaks all the time is probably easy to diagnose. What about the gun that comes in and your customer says it jams sometimes? No contacts, no pattern to it. Just hear some vibes. It just doesn't shoot sometimes. What do you do? What do you do then?
Those are the hardest, but it means everything we have here will have an asterisk by it. Usually there's nothing broke. It's out of tune or it's out of spec. I'm going to give you one of my favorite examples. A gentleman brought in a 12 gauge over under, and he says, when I take it out and I shoot it, it misfires once in a while. So I went through it, cleaned it. I said, honestly, sir, I can't find anything wrong with it. It fires fine for me. Gave it back to him. He took it out, brought it back the next week and said, it still misfires. And I said, okay, well, obviously I'm missing something. It's my fault that I didn't extract all the information from him. In my conversation, I found out he's goose hunting. And when he shoots up, when the gun's pointed up, it misfires. But when he's shooting over decoys, it doesn't misfire. He really hadn't put that together. But sometimes you have to prompt them. When does the problem happen? We know the symptom, but we don't know the cause. So most of the time, customers get that mixed up. The symptom it's misfiring. The cause is something different. With that information, then I was able to go through, and there are two on this over under. There were two rods that have a spring that seat them forward. Okay, they're cocking rods. One of the springs was broke, so every time he lifted the gun up, the rod came back You would fire it, the hammer comes forward, hits the rod, and it uses a bunch of energy to seat the rod, and that comes up and taps the firing pin, or taps the firing pin, which taps the primer. Only when I could do that, then I'm like, oh, okay. So the moral of that story is simply the angle he was shooting the gun at can lead you down the path, down that kinetic chain of parts to figure out, oh, okay, it's doing it then. What's different between horizontal and vertical? And then that led to the solution.
Now, you talked about finding out about the customer first before the firearm, and that's one great example. Do you have a set-based list of questions that you typically go through in your mind, and what are they?
100%. What I do is I sit there and I listen to the customer so he gets all the information out first. Always make sure that you hear them first. Then my approach is, let me see if I understand this right. So you're at the range. Let's say he's skeet shooting. You open your gun, step by step. You put in 2 rounds, you close it, right? And then the bird comes up, you shoulder and you pull the trigger. Yes. Do you release the trigger all the way? Well, I don't know. Are you wearing gloves? I've seen problems where the problem is related to the glove getting caught underneath the trigger and the trigger doesn't return all the way. And you bring them back to that moment. And it's fascinating to see. You can see them going, yeah, you know what? When I do that, I don't always do this, or this happens. And you literally bring them back to the moment when they were having the issue. And usually by the time you're done, there are little clues in there that can save you 30 seconds of talking to him, may save you 30 minutes out on the range trying to duplicate it.
I think it's also important to note that understanding the operating system that the customer is using or the firearm that they're using is going to dictate the questions that you ask them as well. And whether or not you're going to start questioning if it's an ammunition issue or an operator issue as well. It might not be anything with the firearm. It might be ammunition or the operator. For example, if they're shooting a blowback operated firearm, 22, for example, 22 long rifle, blowback, those are inherently dirty firearms because all that carbon buildup blows back into the action components. If people don't clean their firearms, then that's going to build up over the years and it's going to slow those components, the reciprocating mass, the bolt or the slide, whatever it might be. And if they're not using hot enough loads, it doesn't have the energy required to send that bolt back. And in that scenario, it might be the case of it might be ammunition and the operator. If the operator's using a weak stance or grip, and then pairing that with weak ammunition or ammunition on the lighter load side, then you're going to have issues. And there's nothing really inherently wrong with the firearm other than it might be slightly dirty. So just understanding the operating system is going to help you know which way to go and what questions to ask as well.
Yes. That being said, Rick, are there certain operating systems or certain platforms of guns that, like, within the first 30 seconds of picking it up before you even touch a tool, here's what's wrong with it?
I can give you an example. I'm sure Bart has a million examples, but there was a time there when I was working in the shop that I was getting a bunch of these Rossi break action, single shot break action guns, shotguns or rifles, whatever they might have been. And the hammer spring was weak. So the customer was getting misfires, which was a failure to fire because of a light strike. And I knew, like, it was weird how it happened because all of a sudden we didn't have any. And then we had like 10,
You're like, here
come
we
into
go
the
again.
shop. And in like a year, not long. And I could say, I knew it's the hammer spring. We'd change the hammer spring, it would have no issues. I don't
Steve,
know why they all chose to go weak at that point, but
Steve, you brought up a great point. In one of the questions that I have, if it comes in and it's super clean, then one of the questions I'll ask and say, did you clean this gun lately? They're like, yeah, it worked. I took it home, I cleaned it, and then I took it back out, and then it doesn't run anymore. Doesn't run, doesn't fire, whatever phrase you use. I'm like, huh. So you put it back together and it doesn't work now. And usually on semi-autos, that's a big issue. The most common are 1100s and 1187s. They put they put the rings in such a way that it won't allow the action to fully close. So when they close the action, it closes 95% of the way, but it's not locked fully. And it's a safety feature that it won't fire. And I can look up at the counter and go, he put his rings in wrong, right? Because I can see where it's about a 1/4 inch short, or maybe 1/10 of an inch short of closing. So then, if he's a good customer and say, look, let me show you what you did wrong. Pull it open, pull the barrel off. These rings are in wrong. Flip it around and say, listen to it close now. Did you hear it ka-chunk instead of thud? And you can teach them that. I typically don't charge them for that. And the reason is I have a customer for life. They go out and it gets them back into the field. They were treated fairly. And really, at the end of the day, it cost me more time to make out that work ticket than to charge for something. This is almost really kind of a service, a goodwill. But he tells everybody. And then that's that promotion piece that you need to do as a gunsmith. Without guns to work on, it's hard to make a living. So just making sure that you treat the customer right in that situation. But you're exactly right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
if you
I've
don't like
certainly-
it, you just sign that sucker in, keep it in the back, fix it real quick, and then charge them a full day's work or whatever, right?
These guys are too nice. They would never do that. And I've never done this of taking a gun apart, put it back together, and then you have an extra pin or spring somewhere on your workbench.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, where did that piece go?
Those
Is
are
the
bonus
barrel
points.
supposed to go back in?
Yep. There is, like we tell people, there are no extra parts in guns. It's not put in there just for the heck of it. There are no extra parts in guns.
Is it always necessary though? Like, I don't need an appendix to live, but I got one, like,
Yeah.
It will rear its ugly head sooner or later if you do something that doesn't have the part in there, almost without exception.
all right, I'll take your advice.
I think that caveats into it, and this is not necessarily in line with our discussion today, but what Bart just said caveats nicely into modifying or incorrectly modifying parts. So some people who have a little bit of understanding of a firearm operation, but they don't have the full understanding, may modify a component thinking that they're going to do one thing when in reality they do another thing. For example, the disconnector in an AR-15. Well, some people might think, well, if I just take that disconnector out, then it's full auto, right? It's illegal to do that. I'm not advocating that. But by doing that, yeah, you can get full auto fire, but you're also creating an unsafe condition as well, because that firearm might not stop as well. So, or stop when you want it to. So anyway, it's important to know that you need all the components, and you need all the components in the correct geometry or the correct relation. And also going on that same disconnector thing that I was just talking about, if you flip that disconnector spring upside down, it can get locked into place. So it flares out at the bottom. If you flip it upside down and you cram it in there, it's going to not give that disconnector the tension that it should have. And then it'll do roughly the same thing that I was talking about earlier. Yeah. So understanding the components, understanding you need all of them, you need them in the correct geometry, and you need them in the correct relationship is really important.
Yeah. I don't want to get in trouble. So, Rick, can you send me a very detailed video of exactly what not to do to not make my guns full auto?
Yeah.
I don't want to do it accidentally, so I need a video showing
we'll
me.
We'll make this a short. So, what not to do.
Into something that was mentioned earlier, and that's the ammo piece. It's interesting to see how often ammo can be the culprit. As an example, it's not compatible with the gun that you have cycling-wise. It fits, it fires, but you may have a 3-inch Magnum only 1100, and you're shooting 2 3/4 inch skeet loads. The other piece is make sure that you tell the customer, bring in the ammo that you're using, okay, and bring me fired and unfired ammo, because I can tell a lot from reading a fired case. It was there when the jam happened, right? And sometimes you'll see the scratches of a rough chamber or little clues and things of that nature. That just saves you time. But it also saves you money because you're using that ammo to do the final proof check to make sure it runs with his ammo. And shotgun ammo is the worst. It varies so much in pressure and dimensions and tolerances. That's where you run into the most issues with shotgun ammo. The quality of some of the discount stores ammo isn't really necessarily something to brag about. So we always ask them, where did you buy your ammo? I won't mention any brand names, but it's important to make sure that you have that ammo. Sometimes what's marked on the box is not the power isn't the power range of that ammo. Sometimes I know it's marked that, but it's not enough to cycle this action. Think of ammunition for a gun as like fuel for a car. Imagine you're changing fuel in your car from gas station, completely different types. What's not going to run the same? And guns are individuals and they like certain ammo and sometimes they don't like certain other ammo. So real important factor, customer, gun, ammo.
Bart and Rick, depending on the owner of the firearm that's experiencing issues, skill level, is there anything that you wish they did or didn't do before they would bring a malfunctioning firearm to you?
Don't clean it. Leave it as is. I want to have it as close to being in that moment as possible. Don't clean it. Don't wipe it down. Just bring it in as it.
I'd echo what Bart said. I was just going to add, bring it cased and unloaded if you can. Don't just bring it in your holster loaded up and then hand it to me. I've had that happen a lot of times. So anyway, or walking into the store with a long gun, just action
Just
clothes
pointed.
and everything.
Yeah. So one thing I didn't think about until we started talking about it. How often can you, I guess, fix a gun that won't shoot without having to take it out to the range? Or I guess you might have a shooting drum or shooting tube in the shop or whatnot to make sure it does fire. But what's the percentage of not having to go fire it and test it out, or do you always have to go out and fire it and test it out once you figure it out?
I'd
Kind of
say
like the
I don't
rings
know,
thing.
Bart. I think you're on the same lines, but you might disagree a little bit. But I think that you should always test fire a gun before it leaves your shop, just to ensure that it's safe, that it's working appropriately. You're not handing something back that you're unsure of. But with that aside, as far as repairs go, I'd say it's 50-50 of whether or not that repair would influence firing necessarily. Now, there's always that chance because there's chain reactions within a firearm, right? If I'm making a modification or I'm putting in a new one part, even though it doesn't have anything to do with the firing step, it could negatively impact the firing step because it's not even getting to that point. Because now components aren't interacting properly. So I might cycle it slowly just fine. But if I don't test fire it, I can't verify that will operate correctly at speed.
I agree with what Rick is saying. I divide it into two categories: firing, igniting the cartridge, and cycling. So if I have a firing issue all the time, you can, they make little kits that have an aluminum dummy that you can put a primer in and check. You can cut the hull off of a shell, dump everything out except the primer, and use that to check firing. It won't give you a true indicator of everything that's going on, but at least you know it ignites the primer. As far as cycling goes, I use this as my barometer. Okay. I hand it back to the customer. He spends money getting maybe he has a duck blind, lease on a duck blind, or he spends money on a big hunt. And he's going to take time off of work for a week, and he's got 4 or 5 of his buddies out there. And he goes and he tries to fire the gun or maybe shoot a couple shots and it doesn't work. Who's the first guy he's going to think of? And whose name is he going to curse? Me. If you're not that confident that you can hand it and say, yes, you can shoot that once in a lifetime bull elk, or you can go through and get your bag limit of those geese coming in or whatever with all his friends standing around, you have not done your job. If you don't have that confidence, That's what I go by because that's your reputation. Conversely, I've had people come back in, they'll bring me venison, they'll bring me all kinds of stuff, pictures. I just want to thank you. I've had this gun to 3 shops, nobody could get it going. Here's what I shot with it, and thank you. And that's it's either good or bad. They're either cussing your name or praising you.
Talking about follow up to Christian's question about testing guns, are there any failures that you've identified where you don't feel safe shooting it, taking normal precautions, where you got to take additional steps before you test that gun?
If it's a really old gun, make sure that it has, for instance, it's a shotgun. Make sure it's not got a short chamber, 2.5, 2 5/8, 2 9/16 chamber. We don't want to put excess stress on it. A lot of late 1800s, early 1900s guns, they were experimenting with a lot of different designs, and they're really not made for the modern pressures. And I've had people bring in, try to put 3-inch high-speed steel ammo into guns that were made in 1902 that have 2 9/16 chambers. It's like, why? Thank goodness it doesn't fit, because you don't want to do that. It's not rated for this. So to your point, make sure that you understand what the action is rated for. Can it shoot the ammo that he's trying to go through there? And another great example is Damascus barreled guns. Much debate out there about Damascus and how strong it is. Some people say it's much stronger than you think. Just make sure that you're shooting ammo that's rated at the same pressure as when that gun was made.
I think another piece of that too is there may be times where the firearm is unsafe to fire, and you contact the customer, you talk to them about price. They don't want that repair made because they can't afford it. And you're not going to fire it because it's unsafe. The customer doesn't want the repair made. At that point, you're going to have to send the gun out with some sort of a waiver that's releasing liability, because you're knowingly turning a firearm back that is unsafe. For example, I had a Browning BAR once, and it had a cracked bolt. The whole bolt carrier was cracked on it, and the customer didn't want to repair that. So we sent it out with the cracked bolt carrier. They had to sign a waiver for that. So anyway, so that's just an example.
When I used to be a hunting guide, one of the other guides with me, he always refused to shoot anyone else's gun. They'd bring something cool in. Up, I don't shoot other people's guns. He never liked doing it. I don't know if it was if he had a bad experience or what it was. But is there anything from a shooter's perspective of signs or symptoms on a gun that, like, hey, you should do a safety look for these certain things before you shoot again, whether it's, a hairline crack somewhere, extra smoke? Like, is there usually signs that a gun is going to give you that it's not going to be safe to shoot? And what are they?
I would say blown primers, or when the cases start to split, something is too loose dimensionally. It's not holding the cartridge tightly or properly. Primers backing out, cases splitting, things of that nature. Conversely, one of the first signs that I look for when I suspect somebody's shooting reloads, and some people are pretty good about the external cosmetics of what their reloads look like, but not necessarily the consistency of loading, is that when you shoot, you can literally hear the volume difference between round to round to round. Stop, those are reloads. And our blanket policy was we do not shoot reloads. We frown on shooting remanufactured ammo. Most of the time, if there's an issue and it's round related, it's one of those two. The next category is the wrong round in the wrong chamber. So
I have a really good friend that reloads ammunition, and he's all the time saying, hey, we need to go out and shoot my reloads. I don't do it. Not that I don't trust my friend. Well, I mean, that's part of it, I guess. But I don't trust anybody with their reloads.
And
You go shoot
it's
your
it's
reloads.
your
I
life.
won't shoot your reloads. I'll shoot my own, or I'll just go factory ammunition. But that's just it along parts. I trust. I like having a face that's intact. I don't want to trust my friend's reloads.
What is he?
If that makes
I learned that the hard way. I found that out the hard way. I go to a range. There's an RSO out there. He sells reloads, and a bunch of the guys have shot his reloads before. I was like, okay, I'll try a box. First box, I had one of my firearms blow up in my face. I
boy.
pulled the trigger. Luckily, it was a kind of a junky piece of plastic, so everything just fired out. And luckily, I'm not left-handed, but went out this way. No scratches on my iPro, no nothing. Gun was in shambles, but it could have been a lot worse. And so from there on out, obviously, I'm never shooting reloads ever again. So
I don't even like eating other people's food at potlucks. That's
yeah,
Well said.
yeah.
I
Whatever. I've seen you at a potluck, Steve. It might have sounded cool to say.
I never say no.
But I've seen you eat at potlucks.
You don't like to, but you still
Yeah.
do. Like probably like
But
me.
it
right?
looks so
I'm not
good,
gonna like
though.
it. But I'll do
Yeah.
Okay.
You
I-
ate 2 pies.
To your
So-
point, Christian, over 40 years, I have a huge collection of blown up guns that have come in, and it's fascinating. I mean, literally, like you cut them in half and blew them in half, and don't care how strong that action is. Eventually, there is no action that will hold every reload, every mistake that's out there. I mean, I have dozens and dozens and dozens of examples, just some of the wildest stuff. And like people actually do this because they really can't wrap their mind around what this 55,000 PSI really look like 5 inches in front of my face.
Yeah, let's call our buddy Scott over at Kentucky Ballistics and ask about his experience with reloads, hot reloads.
Yeah, it's tough. And what's safe in one guy's gun, and it can be true that it performs great and completely safe. He can be right, and yet it's wrong for your gun. Can absolutely blow it up. Their guns are that individual. A lot of people underestimate that. Guns are individuals. They all have their individual quirks.
Yep.
Well, let's take this back, for our students looking to open up a shop, or those who are listening that have their own shop but just started. Are there any sort of set diagnostic tools that somebody should have in their shop for when these gun no go boom things happen?
I was gonna.
consider.
Oh, go ahead.
What?
Mark.
Okay.
I was just gonna say. I mean, for me, it's a lot of cycling the action, most likely. So dummy cartridges or snap caps, whatever that might be, to action proving rounds, and that's another name for them because you're trying to prove that action cycles correctly. When you're doing dry fire or a dry function check or a wet function check with ammunition, I guess, or dummy ammunition, that's only like as Bart described earlier, that's only showing that the firearm cycles, and it cycles at a relatively slow speed, just as fast as you can manipulate it. The true test to whether or not it fires is taking it to the range or shooting live ammunition out of it.
My advice would be, first, do not be too quick to write a prescription for what the gun is doing. Don't jump at, oh, that's what it is automatically. Even if it's the one you've seen 50 times, sure enough, that's going to be the one that is a little different, or maybe it has 2 issues. There's an expression, prescription before diagnosis is malpractice. It really needs to be in that order. So I look at it as the diagnosis process. Starts with the customer, then the firearm. What does it feel like? Is it gritty? Does it feel right? Is it crisp? Is it dirty? Whatever. Then the ammo. And once you go through and you know the backstory and what we're dealing with and what we're running through it, usually that's enough to send you down the right path. As far as tools, make sure you can do a safety check, whatever it takes for a safety check, headspace gauges and such. Trust your eyes and how it feels, so you can pick up cracks and things, whether it be a kind of breech block like a BAR, like in Rick's case. Take your time and investigate that. Maybe it was the last round that caused all the damage. And then being able to test fire is invaluable. I know folks that do not have access to a range or haven't invested into a test fire tube. Not a problem. Then line the guns up. Go to your range and bring them out and test fire them. It's the cheapest insurance policy you'll ever buy.
Yeah. And one thing I would add to the troubleshooting tools or equipment would be a simple permanent marker or layout die to show where parts are interacting with others, where you're getting rubs. You might actually even detect some cracks if you do that, and that you weren't seeing initially. So that's pretty important too.
Now, this is a question I didn't even think about, but we also have the drone podcast and the drone side and all that stuff. And one of the biggest things we've been talking about is AI. Have you guys had any experience in AI being brought to, firearm diagnostics and troubleshooting and all that stuff?
Personally, no, I haven't. It gives you knowledge. It does not give you understanding.
I mean, I've used it in my work at SDI with gunsmithing, and I can tell you 99.9% of the time it's way off. Like, it's very inaccurate as far as how components interact, what those components look like, what those components even do in the firearm. It can name names, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as diagnosing what's happening, I don't know. It's coming leaps and bounds from what it was even a year ago. So maybe in the future, but as of right now, it would be dangerous and, to borrow a word from Bart, malpractice to use AI to help you diagnose a gun, because it's going to be way off.
So
Christian,
AI is out. Do you still find it's useful? And are there places even out there? Are you going to, on the internet, finding forums? Are there resources online where, man, if you just are coming to dead ends, you can't figure something out? How do you find the person who has found the fix?
absolutely where I was going. So, especially as the years have kind of gone by, the amount of guns that are under recall is astounding. So, if you've got something that just doesn't seem right, do a quick Google search. Is this make model in this serial number range? It'll give you a range. Is this under recall? The second thing I use the internet for primarily is what ammo is this shotgun rated for? Sometimes a rifle or a handgun, but usually it's a shotgun. In other words, how many feet per second, how many ounces of shot, or what rating, 2 3/4 inch magnum, field, skeet, trap, express, whatever the case may be. So then now I know what fuel I'm supposed to run in the gun. Have I ever gone through and said, has anybody ever had this experience? There's been a few times. When I can't validate what my hunch is, and I want to make sure before I go in and open the patient up, so to speak, I've done that before. But that's what I use it for, is to give me that knowledge, but I don't use the AI for understanding.
And I think it's important, Steve, to go a little bit further into that to understand reliable sources and how important those are. There are super reliable sources out there on the internet that you can search. And when they say, oh, I've had this experience with this firearm, or, so on and so forth, you can trust that. It's reliable. That person is a gunsmith, or that person has knowledge in ammunition or whatever. It's verified. You know that. But going to a forum where anybody can post, you really gotta. It's not to say that I haven't done that before, but I do that already with an understanding of how firearms function. So if something is not passing the sniff test, if somebody's saying you can do this, then it's not, but it's not lining up with what I already know, then I'm gonna steer away from that.
Yeah. One of the cool things I've seen, and it's kind of a fringe benefit to SDI students and graduates, is you are joining that big network of people that not everyone's seen every single thing. No one ever has, but you have access to a big group where there's a good chance someone's run into it before. And whether it's in the classroom, on a discussion board, in a Facebook group, or in the Discord servers, and you're asking a question, you have, a big network, a community of SDI grads and students that want to help you out, and you can talk those things through and get those answers.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that general thought, a lot of people, tell them where I work at and what I do and things. And one of the things that they are always glad to hear is all this information is reviewed and vetted and over. We go through these classes to make sure that this is correct information. Does that jive with your practical understanding? Does that jive with what the factory says and that type of thing? It's been vetted. It's not just an opinion. It's been researched and it's information put out there for consumption for use, but it's all been vetted. So I think that's an important piece wherever you get your information. Make sure, has it been vetted or is it just somebody's one-off experience?
Let me ask you this. And, I'm too lazy to build an app. So if somebody wants to steal this, if it's not out there yet, but is there an app for gunsmiths to use as a resource that would be a network of, that app's licensed gunsmiths? Like they would vet gunsmiths, put them on this app. And then if you needed a question answered and you're a gunsmith for a $10 a month fee, you can put whatever questions in there and get answers from an actual gunsmith. Would that be a good idea? Is that out there? If somebody makes this, can I get 10% at least for the idea? Or
I have seen a couple people out there that will answer questions and things. It's so varied, and without the piece in front of you, being able to physically inspect it, it's really easy to get into a liability piece. Let me give you an example. Let's say that somebody calls up and they work with them and gun's not cycling and the whole bit, and they're focused on the action and it won't cycle, and it's got a bulged barrel. Did you do a safety check? Is there a recoil lug crack that you can't see? Liability-wise, the ability to open that up would be the limitation. However, it could be done to sit there and say, hey, here's the areas that I would check, and I can help narrow your search. That could be done. Yes.
Yeah.
teledoc. So tell a gunsmith, video.
Yeah, there
show me what's going on.
Well, Chris, I think to get in front of that, I think that's why it's important when you go out to buy a new firearm, why it's important to do your research. Like what is the dependability on it? What are the reviews? Are you trusting just, an article you read in a magazine and that guy was paid to write something nice about it? And then also, like, what does the back end customer side support look like? Do they have a support line you can call up if you're having issues? What's their warranty service like? I think those are all things that are important. So if you do have an issue, you're not SOL of, okay, now I don't know how to fix this thing, or it's going to be expensive to maintain and repair it.
Yeah. I can tell you that gun that blew up in my face, they got that back to me in 2 weeks. That thing was torn to shreds. I told them what happened. I sent it in and they sent it back 2 weeks later. All good.
No
Brand
questions
new.
asked, huh?
So, yeah. So, well, I mean, there was questions. I answered the questions,
Actually,
but they were still.
You bring up a good point there. A good quality gun has features built into it that help vet the pressure away from the shooter. Not in all cases does it work, but they put steps in there to make sure that they have the shooter's safety in mind in a good design. Vent holes, venting that go down in through the magazine where will vent some of the pressure or out the ejection port or what have you.
Here's
Yeah,
just
a couple
random
examples. A couple examples of those would be that on a bolt action rifle, think of a Remington 700 or a Howa or whatever it might be. The bolt handle fits down into a recess inside the action, 2 pieces of metal. It's not just sitting down with where the bolt can just come straight back. So if those recoil lugs were to fail, there's a redundant safety there. And then Bart was talking about the vent holes. You can see that on the side of bolt action rifles. There's a little hole to expel overpressurized gas that way as well. So yeah, there's those. Anyway, I just wanted to share a couple of examples of those safety features that might be built in.
Just a random question, not to get too far into it, but this is more of a manufacturing and gun design question. But do you guys feel like modern firearms are being designed in a way where they're not designed to be repaired? They're more designed to either it's modularity or, hey, something breaks, just send it back. We'll send you a whole new gun type of build.
In a word, yes. It has to do with, it makes the guns more affordable. Let's take your favorite polymer frame gun. Man, they can turn those things out once you get set up. It's really expensive to get set up, but you can chunk them out. So if you get a cracked polymer frame or something of that nature, how do you repair it? You don't repair it, you replace it. That doesn't mean that they're not of quality. It just means the inherent nature of the material that they're made out of, or the manufacturing process, is done in mass volume, and it can't be duplicated by a gunsmith with a vise, a set of files, and a few hours worth of hard work, like a lot of old guns were made. They didn't have that technology. If they had it back then, they would have been using it too. So I don't hold that against modern designs. It's just the evolution of firearms.
And along that line, it can be tricky as a gunsmith when you get that new firearm in that is malfunctioning and you try to find the component that you need. You know what you need. You could easily replace it in 5 minutes. It would be no big deal. But getting access to that part you can't just go to Numrich or any of these other just wholesale or retail firearm parts stores. You can't find it because the manufacturer holds those kind of in hostage a little bit because they want it back for warranty. They want the customer to send it back to them. So that can be kind of frustrating as well.
Bart, I mean, is that also a reason why our new machining course is so important? So if there are parts that you can't find anymore, you can just make them yourself?
Yep. There's a lot of parts you can make on a mini lathe, and boy, they sure come in handy. Either they're restricted or they're obsolete. The obsolete ones are the ones that are probably more than likely that we could duplicate those on a small lathe. Yep, 100%. Especially firing pins and things like that tend to break. Metallurgy is better, way better now than it was 125, 150 years ago. Metal tended to be two kinds: too hard and too soft. Too hard, they're brittle, they break. Too soft, they mush. And they flare, and then they swage, and then they start to drag, and that type of thing. And so being able to make firing pins and things on the mini lathe, that's all that you need. You just need the right type of material to work with, which, of course, nowadays is very common. Then you can just machine those out rather than spending hours on trying to go through and find something on the internet and then realize, oh, that was for a 20 gauge, this is for a 12, or vice versa.
What are a couple things you guys want to add? You know, I have my notes and my cues and questions here. What's some of the stuff you guys want to bring up?
I have two things I'd like to bring up, and that is this. When you go through and you're looking at a gun, look at going through and looking at understanding the gun, not just replacing the part, but look around, look at the system. How does it operate? How does it cycle? Just take a few minutes and make sure that you understand, because you may not see that gun again for 5 years or 10 years, or maybe it's 2 days. You just never know. You've got a golden opportunity to go through and learn about that operating system. It's in front of you. So embrace that, learn about it so that you can repeat that process. You can store that up there, and then you can use it. Hey, I recognize that system. And as the years go by, people will go, what are you talking about? I've never even seen one of those. Well, X amount of years ago, I had the opportunity to work on one, and this is what it was. Don't just get it running. Understand what made it run, how it was designed. And the second thing is I have to be careful how I say this, but when you're a new gunsmith, don't be afraid to tackle jobs that you haven't done before. That's how you learn. The amount of work that I would get into my shop and say, well, I took it to 2 or 3 shops, and they're like, well, they don't know how to work on this. You're not supposed to know, you're supposed to learn. Gunsmithing is a never-ending education. Educate yourself. That customer is going to pay you to get an education on that gun. Stick with the basics, learn how that system works or whatever, and then pretty soon you start to see the common thread in all these things. They feed, fire, extract, eject. How does it do it? And so take on those jobs, but be honest with the customer and say, look, I've never fixed one of these before. Give me a little extra time. I'll give you a little bit better deal on a price, but it might be 3 months. and then dig into it. Build that knowledge base up. That's how you stack your learning and your knowledge base.
Yeah, I think I would just echo exactly what Bart said, emphasizing again the important. I don't know how many times I have just sat there at the workbench cycling an action over and over just because I'm fascinated by the way it works. It's so cool, you know, and I just like seeing. I think that's just a gunsmith by nature, but seeing how the components interact with each other and saying, that's why that part's there. That's crazy that it does that. And it's amazing that they did it back in the 1800s or whatever it might be. I just think, again, what Bart said is important is take your time and really understand how these firearms function, and then classify that component. Try to classify it into the different operating systems that you know about. And that goes into, again, another word that Bart mentioned is basics. Stick to the basics. If you understand the 8 steps in the cycle of operations really, really well, and you understand the limited amount of operating systems that are out there. I mean, that might be recoil operated, that might be blowback, that might be gas operated or manual operated. And then in blowback, you have a handful of different blowback systems. But if you really understand those, you're 90% of the way there. And then it's just once those firearms come across your bench and you haven't seen it before, well, if you know the operating systems and you know the cycle of operations within that happens in all firearms, regardless of the operating system, then you can classify that firearm. You can say, okay, I haven't seen this one before, but that's gas operated, or I haven't seen this one before, but it's inertia driven, which is a recoil operated system. So it's not as intimidating as you would first think, but you have to take your time to really think through what is it doing and what should it be doing and how can I get it back there?
Yeah.
And
You know those
one
basics, then at that point you can isolate the problem, investigate it, then you can act on it.
And one final thought on what Rick just said, because that's really important, is be able go through it far enough that you would be able to explain it to the customer when he comes to the window. Most guys, most ladies, most people, when they come up, okay, you fixed it. What was wrong? Right? You get your car. It wasn't charging the battery. Well, what was wrong? Be able to speak to them. Okay, this is what was going on. A, B, C. If you can't explain it simply, you probably don't know it well enough. But knowing that gives the customer confidence. Well, he says he got it going, but he couldn't tell me why he did what he did. Well, you want him to walk away, or her, with confidence. You want the customer to walk away with confidence. He got it run. He told me exactly what was wrong. I have confidence.
Words to live by, on and off the bench.
Well said, sir.
Steve, did you have anything?
No, those guys got it all good.
Okay. Now, aside from getting into, or should we get into like most common failures and talk about the processes, or do you guys think this is probably good?
That
Probably a
might
good
be a
place
whole
to-
other episode there.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, that's a lot. It seems like a lot. So maybe we
I've
can
looked-
do a follow-up episode of the 3 or 5 most common failures gun shop sees, something like that.
My opinion is they won't feed, fire, extract, or eject. That's the big 4.
Okay.
Africa has the big 4. I mean, the big 5. We have the big 4. All right?
Okay.
You know what
I
the
don't
big
get
5
that
is in
one,
Africa?
but you're
Christian's not a
way
hunter.
smarter
He
than I
doesn't
am.
know
Yeah.
about
I've like I
Cape
said, I only stay in my
buffaloes and
office
rhinos.
and play video games.
Lots of
So-
animals, but the big 5. Elephant, Cape buffalo, leopard,
Lion.
Rhino.
and rhino. Yeah. Yep.
Snuffleupagus. All right. Well, let's end it there. So next episode, look out, guys. We're going to be talking about common failures at some point. So I'll put that in there. I think we have a couple guests lined up too. So, all right. But for Rick, well, hold on. I guess if you want to learn this stuff, tell them where to go, Steve.
SDI.edu, please.
Please and thank you.
Not don't put please and thank you in your search bar. Just go to sbi.edu and more.
Yeah. All right. So for Rick, Steve, Bart, I've been Christian. This has been the Gun Rack. Have a great week, everybody. Say bye.